Now, why is this important for all of us to grasp? There is nothing wrong with being in the iron stage as long as you know the end result is one of misery, incompleteness. There is nothing wrong with going to school and making tons of money, as long as you know these are not things that will complete you. Get married, have children, take care of your parents, but knowing full well you'll have moments where you will reflect and you will say, kind of like Logan, my life is meaningless. Okay? Yeah, JJ.
Can you be in the silver stage, but so you can't smoke weed when you're in the silver stage?
Well, I mean, if you got a wife, okay, who smokes, and if you got 2, 3-year-old kids, and you've also pushed them into smoking, then yeah, all of you can smoke.
No, you don't want that. But
okay? Look. If we go back to Kendra's question about intentions, okay? You know Cat Williams, no? Yeah. Do you know him personally? No.
I do. No.
So he has this segment in his stand-up where he talks about getting together with Snoop Dogg one day. And they're all sitting around, and Snoop Dogg kind of takes out this bag and everybody's smoking. And he has a special kind of weed. And if you know anything about Snoop Dogg, he can't survive without being high. And so Cat Williams argues that, look, life is a serious business, man. And if you want to take care of your kids, if you want to take care of your family, if you want to take care of your life, you need some space. You need to be reflective, clear-minded. You need to be focused. You can't just be high all the time. Okay? You live in Oakland. You're also African American. Now, Oakland has a lot of negative stuff to it. African Americans have had a relatively difficult history in America. Okay? There is also this perception as to what it means to be African American in this culture. See, I'm from the Middle East. When 9/11 happened, it wasn't really my fault. There was an image above my head, a potential terrorist. Even today, when I go certain places in Sacramento, as I'm walking around, especially as I'm getting older, my beard is all gray, I look more like a Middle Easterner, okay? And more like a potential terrorist. So people give me funny looks. Now, when I get those looks, I have a couple of options. I can either act in a way that encourages or supports the image, which is terrorist, or I can be a bit more elegant. I can challenge their worldview. I can give them a different image of what it means to be from the Middle East. Okay? Now, again, going back to Kendra's question about intentions, why is it that you smoke? Now, remember, drugs have had a long history in the lives of human beings. Okay? And there is nothing wrong with doing drugs. My father takes aspirin, but he is 90. It's good for his heart, and it's good for the flow of blood. Okay? I don't take it. So aspirin, if you want to categorize the form of a drug, it's good for my father, but not for me. And he does it knowingly. Why is it that you smoke? I'm not saying you, I'm just in generality. Why? Well, look, life is difficult. Life is frustrating. Life is uncertain. Life is boring. Life is hard. Life is brutal. So what do we do when there is pain in our lives? We try to find a way to remedy it. Some people remedy anger by going somewhere, sitting, Some people going somewhere for a walk. Some people fight. Some people drink. Some people smoke. But the denominator is I am angry. Now the question is, how do you want to deal with it? Because I assure you, if my class is boring for you and it pushes you into smoking, tomorrow your job is going to be boring. And if you go and smoke and come back to your job high, you'll get fired. Then you won't have rent money. Let's just say that your work is okay with you being high all the time. Well, you will get married. Marriage is a tough business, man. Let's say, God forbid, you'll have children. They're going to frustrate the heck out of you. What are you going to do? They need a father who's present, who's serious, who's caring, intelligent. And all of a sudden you realize, well, you don't really smoke because you got migraine headaches. You don't smoke because you got cancer. You smoke, first of all, because it's part of the Oakland culture. Okay? Second, you come from a community where this stuff is accessible to you rather easily. You have lots of friends who support you. And it's the easiest way. Look, if I'm alone and I'm feeling the pangs of loneliness, what do? I go somewhere and have sex. I go watch a movie. Well, the movie is going to remedy my pain for how long? 2 hours? The sex for how long? 1 hour? Maybe dinner? 2 hours? Then what? So you smoke for one reason, to escape what we call the difficulties of life. Freud used to call this sublimation. Now remember, JJ, you have every goddamn right to be angry. Because our life, it has a lot of missing pieces, man. It's a big puzzle. Where do you go? To whom do you look up to? Who's going to guide you and I through this ridiculous maze called life? There's no one out there. So the easiest trick is, if I get high, I won't even think about the stuff. But the real intentions of getting high, your desires for liberation, freedom. That's really what you're after, freedom. You want release from the boredom, the difficulties, the miseries here. You want release here as well. You want release here as well. In your world, maybe, this freedom comes through smoking. For another, it comes through drinking. Another, by becoming addicted to porn. Another, by going to school. Another, by getting married. Another, by becoming religious. Now, if you live in a cave all by yourself, smoke as much as you want. Because your actions are not going to impact anybody. If, on the other hand, you live in a community where there is your mom, there is your father, there is your wife, your siblings, and your children, whatever you do has a ripple effect. Through your actions, you will contaminate your children. So is it okay for you to smoke if you're married with your wife? It depends how you want to define your relationship. Do you have any questions? Are we? Is it? Anyone else?
My questions, I was good.
Iron, bronze, and silver, they're all part of your physical life. Every single one of them. They will create feelings, emotions. They will create psychological narratives. Some areas will create traumas inside you. There is a good chance that none of us in this class will ever become the salmon fish. Because the physical life will keep us occupied and entertained for as long as we live. Now keep in mind, your ability to reflect deeply about these things, it has an expiration date. When you get to be my age, perhaps a little older, your physical body will slowly begin to decay and erode from within. You'll be far too busy to take care of your body, which is falling apart. You won't really have time to evaluate what you've done. Remember the story of the prodigal son. You don't need to have a father. Every single one of you in this class, and most of you are about 18 to about 30, you are rich, you are wealthy, you have youth, you have health, which means you can, if you're lucky, become like the salmon fish. Come to a point where you can reflect on these three areas of life and deem them far too unworthy for you to live a philosophical life, reflective life. It doesn't mean that you're going to walk away from these. But you understand your intentions when you are in them. You will get high, but only if you have cancer. You will read a book if there's an obstacle that you need to overcome and you need help. You will get married so that loneliness does not lead to paralysis, depression, despair. You'll begin to know your intentions well. You will understand that life is all about politics. Okay? Now, most of you know that if it's 2 in the morning in Oakland and you're really, really thirsty and you want to pull into 7-Eleven and there are 5 people with baseball bats, something inside you says, just remain thirsty. You've become a political animal. This, the iron, silver, and bronze, okay, they are worlds that ultimately will brutalize you. Now remember, this may not have been so for our parents or grandparents. Our grandparents lived in a simpler time. You get married once and you stay married. There is no divorce. You buy one car and you will have it. Our generation is very, very, very different. Divorce rate, 60%. Suicide, 62%. Okay? Any questions or comments before we move on? Luke.
So, can you skip silver if you're like a guy that doesn't crave relationships at all? Also, what if instead of school, you're like a guy that your dream is like to go into the military?
To what?
To go into the military, like if that's your dream, instead
Okay.
of becoming intellectual.
Well, let's tackle the first question. and then we'll kind of try to wrestle with the second one if time allows. Is it possible to skip a stage? The answer is yes. Let me, for example, give you some narratives that come from India. Okay. One of the stories comes from one of the Upanishads. These are like the Bibles of the Indian world. It's about this old man sitting, and there are all these tiny kids, young kids sitting around him, and he's speaking about this particular tree called Kalapatra. Okay. Now, the Kalapatra tree he argues that if you can find it, whenever you go to it, you can ask of it anything and the tree will give it to you. He's not yet done with the story, and he says, well, there is one right there. And 60 kids run to the tree. And what do kids ask for? Candies, ice cream. So they keep asking, and the tree keeps giving, and they end up with stomachache and diarrhea. One kid, on the other hand, stays behind. And the sage looks at this kid and asks, well, you're only 5. How come you didn't run to the tree and ask for candies? He says, because I don't really know what is good for me just yet. I'm afraid to ask. Because if I ask for the wrong thing, and if I consume that which is wrong for me, the consequences may be much more drastic. Okay. Now, India and Indian life and Indian culture is very conservative in many ways. Okay. This is no longer so today, but so they argue that from age 0 to about let's say 6, just go out there and just be a kid. Have fun. Now remember, if you're a kid, say in a city called Mysore or Dehradun, when I was there in 1976, 77, there was no internet. Okay? There were no cell phones. There was one theater in the entire city. Animals were walking around all the time. Snakes and monkeys and cows and horses and donkeys. You would see people on rickshaws. You would rarely see cars. Despite its poverty, it was innocent. And in that innocence, as a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, my mind is not going to get exposed to pornography, to people smoking, to crime, to violence. Okay? And so the desires of a tiny village life is limited to the movies shown in the theaters, okay? And the things I see around the city. Do you know that every single day as you walk the streets, it doesn't matter where you are anymore, about 90% of the advertisements have sexual components to them. When I was growing up, when I was watching cartoons, I would never see characters kissing. Never. And when I was like 11 in Iran, and when this movie from America, black and white, went there, for the first time I saw a man's lips touching a woman's lips. And I looked at my mom and I asked, are they married? She said, oh, no, this is just a movie. And plus, there is this film that you and I can't see. Their lips are actually not touching. It's improper. Okay. Now, when you're 2 or 3 or 4, you're exposed to things that your grandparents were never exposed to. Do you see? Now, so when I said go around and have fun, it depends really where you are, who your parents are. Because if your parents smoke and drink, by the time you're 2 or 3, these days, Jesus, the woman is pregnant, she keeps doing drugs. When the child comes out, it doesn't say mom or dad, it says, give me weed. only 2 hours old. And that is what they demand. Okay? Now, from the age, say, maybe 7 to about 18, your only task in life is go to school. Okay? You don't have sex here. You don't have sex here. You don't smoke here. You don't smoke here. And if you do, you don't do it publicly. Because you remember, Luke, you have a last name. Your first name, I mean, despite it going back to St. Luke, what's most important is your last name. Because it's more than 20 years old. Your last name goes to your father, and then his father, and then his father. And that is the heritage that you need to respect. So in, for example, the Asian culture, you never call anybody by their first name, always their last name. It's a reminder that your life does not belong to you. Okay? So there's a good amount of shame and guilt in doing things that your culture, your community deems as inappropriate. When you're 18 or 19 or so, it's time for you to get married. So about 20, there is marriage. Your parents give you a job. They find a job there somewhere for you. They buy a house for you. You're able to survive somehow. About 6 or 7 months into the marriage, you'll be forced to have children. Yeah, man. The definition of being a kid in America versus being a kid in India, night and day. In America, it's going to take you 60 years to mature. In India, you're 2. You're doing laundry. Now, if you're married at the age of 20, and then you got 2 kids, you work about 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 hours a day. You take care of your parents. You take care of your kids. You got no time for the iron. Most of your time is spent making money to give to your family. Okay? Then they argue when you're about 60. Sorry, my shoulder hurts, so I'm using my left hand. So when you're 60, they say it's your retirement age. You look at your life and you realize you've done what you could for your people. It's time for you to kind of go somewhere, sit quietly, and prepare for your death. It's something that Socrates said some 3,000 years ago almost. If you want to know what the function of philosophy is, if you want to know what the function of reflection is to make sure that you have a good death. You know, because in those last few minutes, you look at your life and you want to make sure you don't have very many regrets. You've lived a relatively productive life. Virginia Woolf is a poet. You know, you don't have to be a Malcolm X. You don't have to be a Mahatma Gandhi. Just raise good kids. You know, if you can't do that, at least have a nice garden where people can kind of just walk past by and say, man, that's a beautiful garden. Do something that is aesthetically pleasing to the senses at least. Okay? Now, this is not America, this is India. Now, let's say you have found a man in India who is 60. Let's say you go to Starbucks, Luke, today. And you go to this man and you say, I am stuck in the iron stage. Do you have any remedies for me? You have a problem. Because you're asking for a piece of wisdom from a man who has never experienced this world. St. Augustine has this beautiful saying. Every saint used to be a sinner. Now, you're addicted to video games. Okay? Now, hopefully, that is a judgment by me. that video games are just bad for your brain and for your life. Okay. Hopefully you will outgrow video games and you will take school seriously, take yourself seriously, take your parents seriously, and take your future seriously. And let's just say you get here. No more video games in the iron. You come to bronze. Okay? And then you get to silver. Let's say you got married, 20 years. You have a niece or a nephew. And you see them at every gathering playing video games. They are asocial, okay, disrespectful, never say hi, never say bye, and whenever you take the game away, they scream and shout. Now, because you were here long time ago yourself, because you are the prodigal son, you took their riches, okay, and messed up your life for about 20 years. And then you went through rehab, whether socially or privately. Okay? You introspected. You cleansed, purged all the garbage from your interior. Now when you look at your niece, you understand how they got addicted, why they scream, why they cry. Now what you do is you tap into this file you have in your memory called Luke when he was 10 to 20, addicted to video games. You retrieve that file, you open it, you study it very carefully, and then you say, Joanna, my niece, we need to have a chat. Now you remember how your parents did to you. They tried to force you to stop playing, but you know that force doesn't work. You take your niece to coffee shop, maybe In and Out for some lunch, maybe what is this place you work?
Fairyland.
Fairyland? Huh? You become her best buddy. And then you do something that the Taoist would say. You become like water. Without her knowing, you slowly begin to change the way she thinks about video games, the way she feels about video games. And it's going to take you about maybe 5 years, maybe 5 months. No one really knows. Because you've had the experience, you can be a messiah in her life. The problem with a 60-year-old man who doesn't have the contamination from the iron or the bronze, he will never be able to understand what you're going through. All they will have is categorical imperative. Immanuel Kant. Okay? You will never be able to ask a monk the pressure on your system due to sexual forces or energies. A monk will never understand addiction to drugs. Be a sinner. Be profoundly contaminated. But through reflection, get yourself out. Understand it. And in understanding, you will gain so much wisdom. And that wisdom, you may not know it now, it'll come in handy 20 years from now. Again, go to any AA meetings. And the person guiding the gathering is no saint. He lost his wife. He lost his kids. He lost his job. He lost his house. He understood what he did and what he lost. Now he's a savior to about 30 people. It is good to skip a stage. It is good. But it's better not to. As long as you can get yourself out of the toxins. Because then you can be there for people. Remember, ultimately, Luke, you are a man of the polis. You're the man of the city, of society. You don't ultimately live just for yourself. Any questions or comments before we go home? Bridget, my apologies for not getting to gold, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands these 3 stages. If we come back on Tuesday, I'm sure you'll be here. My being here is always uncertain, but if you come back on Tuesday, We'll talk about gold, and we'll do so by talking about the life of Socrates and then Plato. Okay? Bridget, yes?
Yeah, I wanted to say, how could one skip bronze? If, is it if you don't get learned, you can do some technical work with your hands?
I'm sorry, say again?
I said, look at can one skip bronze and go to silver, right?
Yes.
And that bronze, it's where you do some learning.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be academic. It basically means that you are mature enough to make some decent money, for example. In other words, you have power that you have saved to use in this life. It may be that you didn't go to all these difficulties of getting a job, going to school. Maybe your parents had a lot of money, they passed, left you $1 million, but because you know how to think well, because you're mentally frugal about finances, you spend your money up here really, really well. But the bronze really is about taking yourself and your future seriously and not jeopardizing it by using the iron components. Okay? There is nothing wrong if you're bored playing video games for maybe an hour. But when you do it 8 hours, you're going to run into difficulties. Thank you for your questions. I am, as always, I apologize if I said things that may have rubbed you the wrong way. So see you next week, Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you for the class. It was good. I feel like I'm moving up to there, so this is really a good thing to think about right now. Yeah, no, I'm really every week now is like pushing me more towards finding like what I want to go to school for and stuff like that, and getting rid of some of the habits that I have in the iron stage that I've been doing for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
So, you know, quit smoking weed. I don't play video games as much either, so I used to play video games 8-10 hours a day. Like when I was 22, 23, drink every day.
How old are you now?
Literally 24.
Oh, okay.
But every day I would drink and think it was just, you know, whatever, like it's not gonna affect me. And then now, you know, it's just kind of like I'm at the stage where I want to take things seriously and actually like.
If I can be of any help, just let me know. I can tell you.